Ready? You're welcome. Good. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Bonnie Rabbi Bonnie is, I think that's how we call you, isn't it? Rabbi, right?
Yes.
That's how we address you. Okay. Rabbi Bonnie Margulis. I spent some time with Bonnie. Oh gosh, it was a couple of months ago, wasn't it, Bonnie?
Mhm.
When we first met. She has so much to say this morning because she's such a busy woman. I don't know how you have time to even eat. I'm just going to quickly review some things out of your autobiography. Your autobiography. You can tell that my mind is not good this morning. Um, Rabbi Bonnie is the founder and executive director of Wisconsin Faith Voices for Justice, and she's the chair of the Wisconsin Religious Coalition for Reproductive Choice, as well as a member of the board of the NAACP of Dane County. She's a founder and steering committee member of the Dane Sanctuary Coalition and was a founding board member of We Are Many United Against Hate. And Bonnie, we know Masood. He's spoken with us a couple of times. So, I'm amazed at these are all, each thing that I've mentioned are powerful, powerful agencies for justice in Madison and internationally, as a matter of fact. So I'm amazed and thrilled to have you here with us. Rabbi Bonnie holds a master's degree in Judaic studies from NYU. And I just have to mention this, that when you were working on your dissertation, you were talking about and doing research on the ordination of women as rabbis. So you were right in the forefront of change in your religious community. And if only they all could follow, You are director of clergy programming, and this is so important, I think, for Religious Coalition for Reproductive Choice. You did that, you served on that for a number of years. There's some other things that I want to mention, and that is that you've been on the board of grassroots organizations of teaching people how to organize from a grassroots level. These are things I think that are so important. The other thing that I want to mention before I turn you loose is that you've been working on the injustices at the borders, which is part of that sanctuary group that you have been active in. So welcome. Thank you for joining us, and it's all yours. I'm just going to turn you loose.
Great, thank you. Wow, I can't believe you found my honors thesis. That was an undergraduate honors thesis. I don't know where you found that information. So thank you all for giving me the time to share my work with you. Wisconsin Faith Voices for Justice is a statewide, nonpartisan, interfaith education and advocacy organization. We started with the uprising in Madison in 2011. For those of you who were in Madison at the time, you know that Governor Walker, one of his first acts as he took office was Act 10, which basically defunded and basically destroyed the public sector unions. And there was an uprising, as we call it, in the state capitol for about 6 weeks. About 100,000 people took over the capitol, and the faith community was involved. At one point, we had 100 clergy marching into the capitol chanting, "This is what religion looks like." And the different faith communities each took a different night to hold candlelight vigil at the Capitol throughout those 6 weeks. And the Jewish community had Monday night, and I think the Methodists had Tuesday night, and the Unitarians had Wednesday night, whatever it was. So we were all very involved and very engaged in really trying to fight for workers' rights, and also some of the other things that the governor's budget had really taken a sledgehammer to, including healthcare and education and transportation. So we were engaged in all of that work. And at one point, we took a group of about 28 different clergy and faith leaders from all different faiths to meet with the governor's staff. We tried to meet with the governor and he wouldn't meet with us. But we were able to meet with some of his staff and really, as faith leaders, tried to talk on a level of morals and values and what this fight was doing to Wisconsin, and that we didn't see that this really reflected our values as a faith community. We got nowhere, unfortunately. At the end of the meeting, one of the governor's staff said, well, we really just all want the same thing, right? We just want everybody to be self-sufficient. And we kind of, did the slapping of the forehead and like, that's not what we want. And that's not the world that we live in. That's not how things work. Um, so after that meeting, a number of us stayed back to debrief and talk about next steps. And we decided that our congregations really needed to know what was happening and needed to understand that the faith voice needs to be raised in the public square. And so we did a lot of sort of ad hoc programming for about a year as concerned religious leaders of Wisconsin. And after a year, we decided, we're not going anywhere. We're not losing momentum because every day there's a new outrage. And we really need to be more formally organized. So in 2012, we became Wisconsin Faith Voices for Justice. We are intentionally interfaith. We are Jews and Christians and Unitarians and Muslim and Buddhist and Baha'i and Hindu and Wiccan and Unitarian and atheist and everything that you can think of. And we work through clergy and congregations to educate ourselves about the issues facing our state and why these are issues that the faith community needs to be concerned about and needs to be vocal advocates for the things that we believe in and that our faith traditions teach us are our moral values. So we have a wide social and economic justice agenda. We run a coalition called Dignity at Work. It's a coalition of some faith groups and some advocacy organizations and some direct service organizations and some labor unions. And we come together on a constellation of issues that make for dignified labor that helps the worker to sustain their families. So things like equal pay, living wage, sustainable hours, paid sick leave, paid family leave, affordable childcare, access to public transportation, affordable housing, uh, gender discrimination, racial discrimination, pension protection, and the right to organize. Um, so we come together on all these different issues. We don't always pay as much attention to each and every issue, but these are among the list of things that we try to advocate for and educate our folks about. In 2016, after the 2016 election, um, we had a meeting of our most active clergy and activists. And after the rancor of the 2016 election, the rhetoric around Islamophobia and anti-immigration and homophobia and anti-Semitism and misogyny, we really wanted to talk about what our role and responsibility is as an interfaith organization to address all those things. And we had a lot of people coming to the meetings, and we did kind of a brainstorming. What are the things that people are most concerned about? What are you most afraid of? What are you most passionate about? What do you think that our role and responsibility is as a faith-based organization to address some of these issues? And we had somebody there from Voces de la Frontera, which is an immigrant rights organization based in Milwaukee. And as we went around the room and we got to Mario, Mario said, what the immigrant community is looking for from the faith community is sanctuary. And that was something that we didn't know a whole lot about, and decided, as with every issue that we take on, we decide the first thing we need to do is educate ourselves. So first, learned everything that we could about sanctuary, what it is, how it functions, the legality of it, the liability issues, just everything we needed to know. And then started going around with Voces de la Frontera, with the ACLU, with Centro Hispano, with some immigration attorneys. And we made presentations to congregations about sanctuary, what it is, and why it was so necessary and so important, and why the immigrant community was particularly living in fear and needed that help and support from the faith community. So by July of 2017, we had a critical mass of congregations and we formed the Dane Sanctuary Coalition. By today, we have 21 different congregations and 7 or 8 different organizations that are members of the Dane Sanctuary Coalition. We have 3 host sites that are ready to welcome somebody into sanctuary who is at imminent risk for deportation. And we do advocacy around immigration rights, the need to create a just and compassionate immigration system, unlike our current system, which is none of those things. Um, and we try to raise awareness about issues both for what's going on at the border and what's going on right here at home, and the many needs that our immigrant community has that need to be addressed. So we have a number of direct service programs as well as our advocacy. We have a volunteer driver program. We are always looking for more volunteers to join us in this service. So we train our volunteers and they sign up to be sort of on call to drive people to Milwaukee for their ICE check-ins or to Chicago for their immigration court hearings. We also have been doing some more local driving, picking people up from detention in Dodge County when they're released from detention to give them a ride back to Madison to meet up with their sponsors. We've been doing some local rides just for people who are trying to get to medical appointments, things like that. Very often the requests come into us at the very last minute. So the more people we have standing by, the more likely we are to be able to match somebody who needs a ride with an available driver. We've also started recruiting people who are willing to host somebody for a short-term stay. When people leave detention in Dodge County, ICE needs to have an address where they are going, or they won't release them. And then sometimes we just have asylum seekers and undocumented people who just show up in Madison and have no place to stay. And so we're asking folks if you have a guest room, if your kid is away at college and their room is available, if you have an in-laws apartment that's empty, if your congregation has a parsonage they're not using, anything like that, where we can have folks who need a short-term place to stay while they look for more stable housing. And it could be a few weeks, it could be a few months, usually not longer than a few weeks, as we work with some of our immigrant agencies to try to find them stable housing. Housing is at a crisis level in Wisconsin and in Dane County, and this is a particularly vulnerable population that have a particularly hard time finding housing. So whatever that we can do. We have a family right now that we've been keeping in a hotel uh, for the last month because they are asylum seeking. They have not obtained asylum yet, but they are in the process. And they were at the Salvation Army shelter, and for some very minor infractions, the Salvation Army shelter threw them out on a very, very cold night with very, very small children. And so we've been keeping them in a hotel while we search for stable housing for them, which hopefully, fingers crossed, on March 1st, they'll be able to move into some housing that Jewish Social Services helped to find for them. Um, so housing is always a huge issue. Um, we also we partner with the Wisconsin Council of Churches on the Wisconsin Interfaith Voter Engagement Campaign. We are in our 4th year of working together, and we organize clergy and congregations around the state to do voter education, voter registration, uh, get out the vote activities. And we also do advocacy for voting rights and against voter suppression and partisan gerrymandering. Wisconsin is the 4th most gerrymandered state in the country, and it means that our elected officials, our state senators and assembly members, don't really have to pay attention or care about what we think because their seats are safe. They only need to be responsive to their base and their funders. And until we have fair maps, we're not going to have fair representation in our state house. So that's something that we that we also advocate for and work toward. We always need people to help with voter registration, with canvassing, with phone banking, with postcard writing. We have a new texting project that we're getting off the ground. We're doing voter registration in the high schools. Um, we're starting a project of doing some tabling at grocery stores and um, potentially at food pantries or at laundromats. Um, Wherever the people are, that's where we're going to go to get as many people registered and out to vote as possible. Um, After the April election, we're also going to be continuing to work with our folks on training them in how to connect with their local and state elected officials, how to do lobby visits, how to build those relationships and make those connections so that um, voting starts at the ballot box, but civic engagement continues throughout the rest of the year with engaging with your elected officials on the issues that you care about. We also have a racial justice initiative called Creating Beloved Community. We have weekly conversations with the leadership of the Wisconsin Council of Churches, Wisdom, Micah, the Interfaith Conference of Greater Milwaukee, the Wisconsin Council of Rabbis, the Jewish Community Relations Council. And we talk every week among ourselves about what our roles and responsibilities are as faith-based organizations to counter white Christian nationalism and systemic racism. We have monthly webinars with our mailing list of over 1,000 people by now. And those monthly webinars are an opportunity for us to bring in statewide speakers who can talk about a wide range of issues from, we've had people talk about critical race theory and what it is and what it isn't. We've had people talking about our school boards and how they operate and the kinds of decisions that our local school board members make every day that affect what our kids learn and what they don't learn. Um, we have had somebody come and from the Wisconsin Public Education Network and talk about the organizing that they do in the communities around local school boards and public education. We've done a training on the 501c3 do's and don'ts around an election and what all of our congregations and nonprofits can very safely do around elections and around lobbying, around advocacy, without ever violating your 501c3. We have our next webinar coming up in a couple of weeks. We have a former U.S. attorney who had Wisconsin as part of his region, and he's going to be talking about the United States Supreme Court and First Amendment issues. In April, we're going to talk about Holocaust education and how that's being implemented and other sort of racial justice curricula that are or are not being implemented in our state and what that looks like. In May, Matt Rothschild from the Wisconsin Democracy Campaign is going to do a training on how to write good letters to the editor on the issues that you care about. So a wide variety of things that our Creating Beloved Community does. And that project of those monthly webinars is called Taking a Faithful Stand for Equity. And we have a pledge that we ask people to take that basically asks you to promise that you're going to be paying attention to what goes on in your local school boards and your local governments. And when you see an issue around equity, that you're going to go to that school board meeting and you're going to testify and you're going to bring a friend with you and you're going to make your friend testify. And then you're going to let us, the leadership, know that this is happening so we can inform other folks in your area. Did you know that this thing is happening? You need to go to that school board meeting and you need to raise your voice. So lots of things that are going on with taking a faithful stance. We also have a project as part of that called Teach the Truth Wisconsin. If our state officials are going to be passing laws that make it difficult for our schools and our teachers to teach the truth about our racial history, then it's our responsibility as congregations to do that instead. So it's the second week of October. That Monday is always Indigenous Peoples Day, and October 14th is George Floyd's birthday. So that's why we chose that week. And we ask our congregations and our folks to pick a place in your region that has some kind of racial justice history, and it could be around slavery or Jim Crow or voting rights, or it could be around Native American rights. Maybe it's burial mounds. Maybe it's a place where a tribe used to live and now it's a school or something like that, or maybe it's the land that our congregations sit on. Maybe it's something around LGBTQ rights. And we want you to do something creative, do some sort of video, a pop-up lecture, a walking tour, interpretive dance, a rap song, whatever it is, do something and videotape it, and send us the video, and we put it up on the Teach the Truth website, and share it with our congregations and encourage people to use those videos as a means of highlighting some of our racial history and some of the things that have been happening in our state and the ways that our state got built on the backs of slave labor, um, disenfranchising the Native community, of dispelling them from their lands, whatever the justice pieces that you want to highlight and raise up. Um, what else? There's other things that we're doing. We do a lot of interfaith programming. We have a new project coming up March 9th and May 18th called Interfaith Intersections. And I have links for all these things. I'm going to put a lot of links in the chat for you. Um, Interfaith Intersections is a project of intentional conversations across faiths. So we are starting out with two panels. Again, one March 9th, it's going to be at the Madison Friends Meeting House, and one May 18th, it's going to be at Temple Bethel. And we pose a question, and we have a panel of 3 or 4 folks from different faith traditions. These are lay people. These are not clergy. They're not academics. They are not so-called experts in their faiths, but they are people in the pews who are going to talk from their own personal faith understanding and how they live out their own faith tradition. And we pose a particular question at each event, and our panelists address that question. And then we have time for small groups to break out and to have their own discussions about the question and then come together to report out. Usually, so throughout the year, we would have different questions that are posed to our panelists, but because this is a pilot, we decided to stick with the same question for these first 2 pilot events. And the question is, where do you get your moral compass? So what are your ideas and your understanding of your faith tradition about what your moral responsibility is? And we kind of leave it up to each panelist to figure out for themselves what that question means to them. So it could be, how do I make moral decisions in my own day-to-day life? Or it could be, what is my moral responsibility as a person of faith to engage with the public square and to bring justice into our community? So however each of our panelists understand that question, they're going to address it. And then again, we'll have time for breaking out into small groups and for each group to have their own conversation about their understanding of what that question means for them. So we're very excited. We're going to see how it works. The first one, March 9th, because it's the first time, we decided to keep it simple. And so it's all in person. The May 18th one, we're going to see if we can do a hybrid, both in person and on Zoom, and see if we can make that work. We also have our 7th annual Ramadan Interfaith Iftar coming up on April 1st. It's going to be at Cromrie Middle School. This is our first time since the pandemic coming completely back in person, potluck and everything. We were back in person last year, but we limited the numbers and we had it catered. But this year we're going for broke. Everybody's invited. It's potluck, which is how it traditionally has been. So iftar means break the fast. It is what the Muslim community does every day during Ramadan. So they fast from sun up to sundown, and then they break their fast at sundown. And it is usually in the Muslim community, it is usually a communal experience, and people come and they bring dishes to share, and it's very celebratory and very joyful. Um, and so we do this once. One Saturday during Ramadan, we have an interfaith iftar. We have people come from all different faith traditions. And it's an opportunity to learn about Ramadan, to learn about Islam, and to have just an amazing potluck dinner, and meet people and have time to talk and to get to know folks across faith traditions that you otherwise might not necessarily have an opportunity to meet. Um, so it's a great time. It's very kid friendly. We've got kids running around. We give them pizza and we have art projects out for them. And so it's very fun. So bring your kids, bring your grandkids. Um, and the last thing I want to mention, and then I'll put a lot of stuff in the chat. We just um, finalize the date and the speakers for our annual celebration. This is our yearly, yay, we thank God made it through another year. Um, and here's all the work that we did over the past year that we're very proud of. And these are the things that we're planning to do for the coming year. And we hope people will come out and support us. This is our annual fundraiser. So there will be a gentle ask at the beginning and the end of the evening. But mostly we have our keynote speakers and our Voice for Justice awardee who will be speaking. And our speakers this year are Representative Francesca Hong and Representative Christina Shelton. Francesca is a representative here in Dane County. Christina is in Green Bay. And together they are just amazing champions for justice. These two women individually and then together as partners, they work together on all kinds of justice issues. And in 2021, when they were both newly in the assembly, they introduced the Economic Justice Bill of Rights. Unfortunately, it did not go anywhere, but they are reintroducing it next week on March 9th. And so at our annual celebration, we invited them to come and speak about the Economic Justice Bill of Rights and all the things that are included in it and why it is so important for our state. And then the person who's going to get our Voice for Justice Award is Reverend Jerry Hancock. He is one of the pastors at First Congregational, and he has been steeped in prison ministry for many years. And so we are giving him our award to thank and to honor him for that work. And we'll give him some time to talk about that work that he does. So that's a lot. I probably missed a few things. We're working on housing with the Wisconsin Council of Churches. We just had our first Interfaith Housing Summit in Dane County. We had about 60 people come out and talk about the housing crisis and the responsibility of our faith communities to be involved and what some of our congregations can do to make use of land that they might have that they're no longer using, or their building that they might be able to repurpose if they're no longer using it or not using it fully. And so different ways that the faith community can get involved in addressing the housing crisis in Dane County. And we work on healthcare. We work with Wisconsin Council of Churches on Faithful Action for Healthy Wisconsin. It started around COVID, around trying to keep everybody safe and keep our congregations closed, and advocating with our elected officials for robust public health orders and economic relief package for people who were left out of the federal economic relief, primarily undocumented folks. Didn't get too far with our elected officials, but we worked on it. And we've since then, as COVID has been less of a emergency, we have pivoted to focus on the intersection between healthcare and racism, and the dismantling of our public health system, which we saw during COVID, how hard it was to gear up because our public health system had been so defunded and understaffed. And we're working with the UW Population Health on a messaging project to change the narrative around individual responsibility and just, like going to see your doctor or having access to health insurance, as important as those things are, but really looking more globally at the social determinants of health and how our public policies have conspired to keep people living in unhealthy neighborhoods without access to clean water and clean air and sustainable jobs and walkable neighborhoods and living in food deserts and childcare deserts and all the different ways that people don't have access to living a healthy life because of the policies that we have. So that's another piece of the work that we do. So I'm going to stop talking. I know I talk a lot. I'm going to put some things in the chat and would love to get your questions, your reactions, your comments, and hear what's of interest to you all and what you're interested in, where you've been working and what you're interested in continuing to work on.
Thank you, Bonnie. I have to tell you, you'll have to excuse me. I'm suffering here with COVID, everybody. But Bonnie, we have been acutely aware over the years that we've been meeting how important the faith community is, especially to marginalized people. The churches, the synagogues, the mosques, the places people can go to get help. But to hear you talk has been a revelation. You have energized so many people to do work through their congregations. And I think especially of the sanctuary work that you do, the injustices of people who are undocumented and have no recourse, turn to their churches, turn to their faith community. So, wow. The other thing I just want to comment on is you've grabbed hold of the idea of grassroots organizations, of how to get people who are involved at the local level to make things happen. I'm particularly interested in Teach the Truth, Wisconsin, where you encourage us to speak up at local meetings, not to just critique things, to speak up and to be involved. And you've offered this morning such a wealth of ideas for involvement, everything from taking someone into your home to doing nothing more than speaking up. There's just so many opportunities available, and you've certainly made them, you've opened our eyes to a lot of them. I'm excited about the Ramadan breaking of the fast, and I plan to attend. If I go, Bonnie, should I also bring food?
Yes, please. So
Okay.
I just put in the chat the link to register, and there's also a link to a Sign Up Genius.
Good.
And so the Sign Up Genius is where you will indicate what dish you're bringing, not the specific dish, but main dish, salad, or dessert. And also in that Sign Up Genius, there are also opportunities to volunteer, because there's a lot of work that goes in. Sorry, I'm just putting something else in the chat.
Another thing that your groups have really been active in, and I signed up for this early on, was the voting. All right, all of the ways to get people to vote. Not saying how to vote, but to have the right to vote, to exercise that, to get involved. And as we go towards our April elections, I'm sure we're going to hear more about that. So put that in the chat as well, please, Bonnie.
Yes, I just put the Interfaith Voter Engagement Campaign link in the chat.
Great. Would you, I'm gonna just ask our folks that are on Zoom this morning. This is recorded, by the way, so we can go back to listen and get excited all over again. But questions from any of you, please. Martha, did you have a question? Martha Main? Martha, if you do, you are muted. Sue Simon?
Yeah, I'm wondering, Rabbi, is there a Catholic church in Madison that is deeply involved in the racism issue? Because mine really isn't, and I'm looking for a home.
Yeah, I don't know of a Catholic congregation that is involved. We have individual people from the Catholic tradition. Actually, one of the people speaking at our May 18th Interfaith Intersection, Susan Kiernan, is going to be speaking from her Catholic faith. We have a lot of nuns who are involved. We love the nuns. We love Sister Mo. And we have recently connected with Bishop Hying, and he and his office are engaged in the housing work that we're doing. Chris McAtee came from his office, came to the housing summit. And I know that we've approached some of the Catholic congregations in the past about joining. We have a mailing list of over 1,000 people who get our Wisconsin Faith Voices for Justice e-news, but we have 26 congregations that are dues paying members. So that's our membership. Our membership is congregations and organizations. And we've had, some interest in the past from folks from some of the Catholic communities who've gone back to their congregations and asked if they would join, and it hasn't happened. I'm not exactly sure
not
why.
surprised. I'm not surprised, Bonnie, seeing that the Religious Coalition for Reproductive Choice is not something that
That's
by and
probably
large
providing
Catholic,
thing.
Catholic congregations
Right.
reach
So
out to.
Right. So Wisconsin Faith Voices for Justice does not engage in reproductive justice work. The Wisconsin Religious Coalition for Reproductive Choice is a separate organization. And when Wisconsin Faith Voices for Justice was formed, some of the sisters came to me and said that they wanted to be involved in Wisconsin Faith Voices for Justice, but they couldn't do it if it was going to be doing reproductive justice work. So I committed that we would not engage in that work with Wisconsin Faith Voices for Justice. But since I'm also the chair of the Wisconsin RCRC, I felt like the work was happening and was happening through faith communities. And so I'm a very big fan of let's not duplicate effort and let's not reinvent the wheel. So if the work is happening over here, we don't need to do it over here. Which is also why criminal justice is not a big piece of what we do, because that's a big focus for Wisdom and we don't want to duplicate effort. So we support Wisdom in that work, and we partner with them whenever they ask us to, but they take the lead on that because that's their thing, right? And we work on other areas. So I was okay with not doing reproductive justice work, but everybody knows that I do it, and it's hard to make the distinction. And Wisconsin Faith Voices for Justice is very engaged in LGBTQ issues, and that also can be an issue for some people in the Catholic Church, not everybody. But we have we're now working on our second annual Interfaith Pride service and our third annual Transgender Day of Remembrance service. And we're always engaged in advocacy on LGBTQ rights. So I'm part of a coalition that's been working to get conversion therapy banned and to fight against some of these anti-trans bills that try to keep trans kids off of the sports team, that they of the gender that is their identified gender. Bathroom
Well,
bills.
I'm amazed that the work that you do is focused enough to determine where not to duplicate things that are happening in the community through other organizations, but rather to provide support for them. I think that's amazing, because that isn't what we usually see, that there is so much duplication and not joining of resources. So that's fantastic. Bonnie, how did you get into community organization?
I've always, my rabbinate has always been a social justice rabbinate. It's just what I do. When I was in rabbinic school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I knew I didn't want to be in a congregation, and I was thinking I was going into academics, and was heading toward a PhD. And when I was the first year of rabbinic school is in Jerusalem, and whenever rabbis come through, because they're always visiting, either they're on sabbatical or they're bringing a congregational tour or whatever. So the rabbinic school would bring the rabbis to come and speak to our class and talk about, the practical realities of being a rabbi, and what rabbinic life is really like. And we had a rabbi come to speak to us once. It was the opening of the Israeli Religious Action Center. And the movement that I belong to, Reform Judaism, has a religious action center in Washington, D.C. It's the advocacy arm of the Reform movement. And the executive director at the time, Rabbi David Saperstein, was in Jerusalem for the opening of the Israeli Religious Action Center. And so, as always, they invited him to come speak to our class. So he came and he talked to our class, and he talked about the Religious Action Center, which, even though I am a seventh generation Reform Jew, I didn't know it existed, and talked about the work that they do and all the different justice issues that they address and that they address as Reform Jews, and all the work that he did advocating in our United States Capitol, with our U.S. senators and Congress people, and with the administration. And I thought, wow, they pay you to do that. I just thought we were supposed to just do that stuff. Like social justice, it's been drilled into us since babyhood. I thought that's just what we did. I didn't know somebody would pay you to do that. So I was very excited, and the summer between my second and third year of rabbinic school, I was an intern, a legislative assistant at the Religious Action Center, and I worked on immigration. Who knew that years later I would still be working on immigration? And immigration and education, I think, were my issue areas. Yeah, and I've been doing that ever since. So before we moved to Wisconsin, I was on the national staff at the Religious Coalition for Reproductive Choice, organizing clergy and congregations around the country to be vocal advocates for reproductive justice.
We recently had Freedom from Religion here in Madison come and speak. And again, it was an eye-opener, I think, for many of us, the kind of work that has to go into keeping religion out of politics, or politics out of religion, I should say. So this is, you have so many, you touch on so many things. Particularly, I'm glad to hear that you're working with Centro Hispano and their new location that they're going to be building. But Karen Collier Menendez came and spoke with us, or Karen Menendez Collier came and spoke with us a few years ago, and said something I don't think we've ever forgotten, that the hardest thing for their members, for the people who are here from another country and are trying to survive and make it, was that they missed their families. I'll never forget that. Of all of the things they could have talked about, all of the concerns that they had, that they missed their families. And I see that many of the faith communities provide that family for them, and give them the opportunity to feel finally at home, hopefully. So, excuse me, I can't. Don't get COVID, folks. Anybody have any questions of Bonnie? Bonnie, I know you have an 11 o'clock meeting, so I'm going to tell you that you can, step out at any moment. You've given us a lot of things to think about this morning, and I think that really, are you still here? No? Oh, there you are.
Yeah, I'm right here.
Okay. You've given us a lot of things to think about, but thank you for putting all that information in the chat room. And I know also how to get in touch with Bonnie. If any of you want to speak with her one-on-one or find out things that you can do in all of the areas that she's provided opportunities in. Can't thank you enough, Bonnie. You've, as usual, shaken us up a little bit. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you all. I appreciate your giving me the time, and hope to see you at some of our events.
I think you will. Thanks.
Great. Great. Thank you all.
Bye.
Have a good day
Thank you. You too.
and feel better, Pat.
I plan to. Thanks. So,